Let's bring in Senator Angus King, the independent senator from Maine. He sits on both the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Senate Committee on Armed Services. Senator, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Kate, great to join you. Boy, there's plenty to talk about this morning.
There sure is. Let's get right to it. I want to ask you first, especially from your perch sitting on the Senate Intelligence Committee, what you have learned, if the committee was briefed on this operation in Somalia overnight. Have you heard anything more this morning?
I haven't heard anything more this morning. I think this is part of the ongoing efforts of the administration to use lethal force when necessary to try to decapitate some of these organizations. Leadership's important, Kate, and I think that was the target of al-Shabaab, and clearly similar kinds of strikes are taking place against ISIS. I think that's part of the strategy of the administration.
Yeah, and one question still this morning on that Somali raid operation is whether or not it was successful and who exactly were the targets. Have you gotten any suggestion of that yet?
No, I was in touch with my top security guy this morning about 20 minutes ago, and we did not have any word as of right now what the results were. I think the outlines of the purpose of the strike have emerged, but I don't think we'll know for another probably hours, if not days, whether or not it was successful.
And this all, of course, comes as President Obama is facing increased pressure and a whole lot of criticism on his approach in how to deal with ISIS, specifically in Iraq and Syria. I wanted to get your take. Senator Dianne Feinstein, you know her very well. She's the chairwoman of your committee. She also had some very important words about the president's approach, saying that this has shown that he is cautious, maybe too cautious with regard to ISIS. Do you agree?
Well, I think it's a real challenge. You know, the president's in a kind of a box. The public wants a strong, muscular president that takes action on our behalf, and yet at the same time, the public doesn't want another war in the Middle East. There's a little bit of schizophrenia on the part of the public. I never saw anything like the reaction we had a year ago when the president was talking about strikes in Syria with regard to the chemical weapons. People didn't want us to do it. And yet at the same time, they criticized the president for not being aggressive enough. I think they're trying to find the right balance. I do think one way they could be, I think, more effective and more aggressive with regard to ISIS is to strike in Syria. Raqqa is where ISIS is headquartered. ISIS has ignored the Syrian-Iraq border. I don't know why we should pay too much attention to it. Kate, ISIS is the real deal. They're a real threat in a number of ways, and one of the ways that really bothers me is a lot of their people, it's in the thousands, are from European and other countries that have what's called a visa waiver program with the United States, so they can go back to their country, get on an airplane in Paris or London and fly to the U.S., no questions asked. And this is a real danger to us, and I think the president is realizing that and is upping the ante incrementally, and I think he's got to take the next logical step, which is to hit him in Raqqa.
Where do you see evidence that the president is realizing that? I was reading in the opinion piece written by John McCain and Lindsey Graham. I was reading it once again this morning, and they put it this way. Continuing to confront ISIS in Iraq, but not in Syria, would be fighting with one hand tied behind our back. It seems that you agree with that. What is the hesitancy then on the part of the administration to do just that, get the other hand out from your back?
Well, there is a question of what is the president's authority here, and what's Congress's role. At what point does he certainly has the authority as commander-in-chief to protect American citizens. And if you notice, he's been very careful to justify the strikes in Iraq so far as either preventing a humanitarian crisis with the Yazidis or protecting American citizens. Striking ISIS's headquarters in Raqqa in Syria is a different level of action, if you will. And you know, Congress can't have it both ways. We can't sit on the sidelines and continually criticize, and yet at some point we're going to have to make some decisions about what level of commitment we're going to authorize the president to make. I think he is. I agree with Lindsey Graham and John McCain in this case. I don't always, but in this case, I think they're right. These guys are dangerous. They're clearly a danger to the United States, to American citizens. And as I say, if they ignore the border between Iraq and Syria, I don't know why we should worry too much about it. I think we have to hit them in their leadership. That's one of this group's strengths, is their leadership and management, and I think that's where we have to try to strike.
And Senator, you raise an important point. What is the role of Congress here? Congress returns after the break next week. Do you think Congress should have, I guess maybe the question is, how much say do you think Congress should have on the way forward for the president with regard to ISIS?
Well, you know, the Constitution's very clear. It says that the president is the commander-in-chief, but Congress has the power to declare war. We haven't declared a war since, I think, World War II.
That's exactly right.
And it's a little frustrating that Congress is very good at second-guessing. That's probably our #1 skill. Not very good at actually making the decision. So whether or not the president should turn this over to Congress, I think Congress needs to have a vigorous debate, and the American people have to be engaged in that debate about what are our interests. How far are we willing to go, and how do we exercise American power in a way that is sensible, that will be effective, and yet doesn't drag us into a war that could, frankly, last generations? Here's a great danger, Kate. This can't be turned into a war between the Muslim world and the non-Muslim world. That's just what ISIS wants. And if that happens, if we're dragged into that kind of debate, and confrontation, our grandchildren are going to be fighting that war, and that's not the war we should be fighting. We should be isolating these people that are extremists, that don't represent the mainstream of Islamic thought. And frankly, the only good news here is that ISIS is they're so bad that they've formed a focus for people that are normally enemies: Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the U.S. Everybody believes that these guys need to be contained and controlled. And that may be, as I say, that may be the only good news coming out of this, is that they're a common enemy for most of the rest of the world. But we have to keep them isolated and not allow them to turn this into a war between the Muslims and the rest of the world. That would be a disaster.
And Senator, you point out, I mean, this is an important debate to be had, but when does debate need to wrap up and action need to begin? That's kind of the question, I think, facing the president right now. A lot of deliberations going on. You're one of the strong voices on this. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate. Glad to be with you. And I think we all need to realize this is a dangerous time, and caution isn't a bad thing in this situation.
Senator Angus King, thank you.